Hello and welcome everyone to this PrintWeek webinar on mineral oil-free ink, need of the hour, in association with Siegwerk. During this session, you'll have several questions on your mind about this topic. Please feel free to share them on the questions option on your screen, and I'll hope to get answers from our speakers at the end of their presentation. Migration optimized inks, besides being safe inks, also guarantee the best standards. And today, it's the best standards that will preserve the value of human safety, health, and lives. Conventional printing inks, adhesives, polymer-based packaging materials have harmful effects on ecological aspects as well as human well-being. The next 60 minutes will dwell about how to decimate the impurities in food contact materials that have increased over the last few years. Today's packaging converters have to be aware of chemical compounds that are incorporated within polymeric materials to improve functionality, because it may interact with food components during processing or storage and migrate into the food. Many packaging converters deploy different ink systems depending upon the application and brand owner compliance requirements. Today's session about mineral oil-free inks and migration optimized inks will focus on how to switch over to safe ink systems for food and food-like applications, considering consumer safety. I hope it will help packaging converters to have better control on good manufacturing practices and build a safe reputation in the market in the context of delivering safe packaging material for customers. We are joined today by Dr. Evert Delbanco, Director of Food Safety and Toxicology at Siegwerk. With a rich experience of over 20 years, Evert has been part of Siegwerk for 5 years now and is globally responsible for food safety, toxicology, and regulation. He is also actively involved in many European associations and is the chairman of European Printing Ink Association's Non-Intentionally Added Substance Risk Management Task Force. We'll also hear from Jatin Takkar, Head Product Safety and Regulatory, Siegwerk India, who will give us an Indian perspective on the topic. Jatin, as we know, has been involved with several brand owners and regulatory bodies like FSSAI and BIS for raising the bar of packaging safety in India. He has over 25 authored articles on packaging safety and has taken part in various international forums as food contact material expert. Thank you both of you for joining us today, and over to you, Evert.
Yes, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Hello and good afternoon also from my side. I hope that everybody can at least hear me. And now I try to share my screen so that we can start. So, I hope you can see my screen now. Otherwise, please raise your hand. I will start my presentation right now.
We can see your screen, Evert.
Okay, that's perfect. So the title of my presentation is Mineral Oils in Food Packaging. So mineral oils are a critical class of substances. I will come to that more in detail in the course of my presentation. And food packaging certainly is quite a sensitive kind of application. So that's a kind of unfavorable combination, and some measures needs to be taken. But before I start and I jump into the topic, I would like to send you some greetings from Cologne, which is my hometown, and I'm sitting in Cologne. So after more than 1 year of the pandemic, we are in the meantime used to such kind of webinars, such kind of meetings. Nevertheless, I'm looking forward to have physical meetings again, and I hope to meet all of you physically soon in the future. Let me introduce you to the agenda of the presentation. So I would like to start with packaging safety a must, and I would like to explain you why safe food packaging is so important. In the second part of my presentation, I will introduce you to the concerns of mineral oils. In the third part, I would like to continue with solutions Siegwerk offers in this respect. And for the fourth and the fifth part of the presentation, I will take over to my colleague Jatin Takkar, who has already introduced to you as well. So this slide, I take the slide in many presentations, and I really appreciate that slide because I can quite well explain which aspects need to consider in the course of packaging safety. So first of all, first part is the regulatory part and the regulatory compliance. It is not negotiable, it is a must-have. And in the past, more and more regulations have been established. One trigger for that were food safety scandals in the past, but also public pressure. So as a consequence of that, we are facing an increasing number of regulations, and this, of course, is a challenge. Second part is about consumer safety. It is highly important, and in many regions it requires additional measures beyond the legal requirements, because the legal requirements are unfortunately on a global scale not harmonized. And for that reason, in some areas, regulations are sufficient in order to guarantee consumer safety. But there are also a lot of regions available where, from our perspective, additional measures need to be taken. And I will explain this in the course of my presentation, what I exactly mean. A key in terms of consumer safety is to control the risk of migration, and that is really key. And as soon as migration is under control, then consumer safety is in a way guaranteed. The third part is about so-called perceived safety or consumers' perception. If you take the slogan, and it is true, perception is reality. What does that mean? So if something is regarded to be unsafe by consumers, even if there is scientific evidence that it is safe, then it is a potential threat for each company. If you take the social media, they have really big power. So news can be distributed around the globe overnight. And if something is regarded to be unsafe, however, it is not unsafe, and this is distributed via social media, then you can easily imagine that this is a potential threat for each company, and you have to work against it. So again, 3 aspects: regulatory compliance, consumer safety, perceived safety. And I will, for each of this topic, I will go in within the next minutes a little bit more into detail. In this slide, you can see that also in India, scandals or at least analytical findings happened during the last decades. So, for example, since in 2003, pesticides were found in cold drinks. Then in 2015, many people know it as Maggie scandal, was about lead findings, analytical findings of lead in noodles. Then I can also mention contaminants like phthalates and heavy metals in cold drinks, or inks in newspapers are recognized by the FSSAI as a potential threat for the consumers. And finally, there was a study by authorities analyzing complaints, and the conclusion was that food packaging highly contributes to complaints. And as I already mentioned in my first slide, as a consequence of food safety scandals, very often the legislation is getting stricter, or even additional laws are implemented. And the same took also place in India. So if you look at the bottom of my slide here, there you can see some regulatory developments. For example, in 2006, the FSA implemented a harmonized food law. In 2011, the FSSAI came into existence, and packaging norms were changed for exports in 2017. And most recently, the FSSAI issued new regulations for food packaging, and the BIS, the Bureau of Indian Standard, revised multiple standards to upgrade national packaging norms. And as a consequence of that, for example, we now have a toluene ban in India. That's about a little bit more in detail the first part, regulatory compliance. So the second part of my first slide was related to consumer safety, and I mentioned that it is key to control migration. What is migration? So migration is quite general, the transfer from or through the packaging into food. And we as an ink supplier, of course, our intention is to minimize the migration of ink ingredients through the packaging into food. Generally, there's a differentiation available between 3 different types of migration. The first type is called diffusion. And by the way, this is the most prominent one. And here you can see a picture where you have red dots on the packaging. These are migrating ingredients of an ink layer, and they are able to migrate through the packaging into the food. In this case, in this example, we have noodles, and there's also an example, a real example where this kind of migration, according to the diffusion principle, ended up in a kind of food safety scandal. This happened in 2009. I'm talking about benzophenone, which is a photoinitiator for UV printing technology. And this benzophenone migrated via the diffusion principle through thin plastic bottles into cream at that time. And as a consequence of that, many products have to be recalled, and it was detected by consumers. Consumers complained at that time due to a strange odor and taste of the cream. Second principle of migration is called Setoff. It works like that. So due to, in this case, there are coffee cups, and due to stacking of the coffee cups, the inside layer is in contact, in direct contact with the outside layer, which is printed. And due to Setoff, the inside can be contaminated with ink ingredients, and as soon as you fill coffee or tea or whatever into the cup, then this beverage can be contaminated with the migrants, and finally the consumer is exposed to these migrants. There's also an example for this kind of migration. It might be actually the most prominent food safety scandal in the history of food safety scandals. It's called ITX scandal. It happened, it started in Italy in 2006. This scandal, millions of liters of juice and baby milk had to be recalled. And yes, of course, you can easily imagine that this also had a huge impact on the business for Nestle at that point of time. And finally, in order to complete the different migration scenarios, we have the so-called Gasfast transfer, which is not necessarily coming from the ink. So it's very often the origin of migrants in the gas phase are coming from secondary packaging, and they can they are available in the gas phase, and they can pass the primary packaging and contaminate the food. In this example, you have cereals, and very often actually mineral oils are available in the gas phase, and mineral oil contaminate food according to this gas phase transfer. There is also an example. It is from a real example from 2010, where actually cereal boxes or cereals were contaminated by mineral oils. Millions of cereal boxes had to be withdrawn at that point of time from the market, and as you can see here on the slide, at that time, drop of net income for the brand owner was minus 15%, which is tremendous. Let me come to the factors which can influencing migration. Of course, it is the size the migrants. The smaller the migrants, the higher is the migration risk, and the easier it is for the migrants to pass potential barriers. There is an accepted cutoff for migration. So substances with a molecular weight higher than 1000 Dalton are regarded not to migrate, and substances below, with a molecular weight below 1000 Dalton, are able to migrate. So that's of course, that's not a very sharp border, but at least it is an indicator which kind of substances in terms of the molecular weight need careful observation. The application weight of ink, of course, has also an influence on the migration behavior. The higher the amount of applied ink is, the higher is also the migration risk. Storage temperature is also relevant. The higher the temperatures, the faster the migration and the higher the migration risk. Storage period is also relevant. Long-time storage, a consequence of long-time storage is a higher migration risk. And one quite important aspect is the substrate as such, the packaging structure, which has different functional barrier properties. So here you can see in brackets, PE does not have quite good barrier properties. PET is better, PBT even better, and aluminium has quite good barrier properties. A layer of 6 micrometers aluminium is regarded as a total barrier. And one additional example for a total barrier is glass. So if you have beverages, for example, in glass bottles, glass is acting as a total barrier. And finally, the foodstuff, which is packed, has also an influence on the migration behavior. So different foodstuffs have different polarities, and as I said, this is also an influencing factor for migration. So I talked about the regulatory compliance, I talked about migration, and now the third aspect was perceived safety. I would like to come back to the noodle scandal, which happened in 2015 in India. But I also would like to emphasize that this case was not related to food contact materials, but nevertheless it had a huge impact on food safety. And Nestle was affected. Brand reputation was damaged globally. The brand was under governmental and NGO scrutiny for several months. There was even no production for several months. The whole noodle market itself shrunk up to 50%. And this is really an indicator for perceived safety. So due to all the news in the media, and again, also the power of the social media, not only Nestle noodles were affected, but the whole market, because consumers' perception at that point of time was that there is something unsafe. And as I mentioned, this is really a huge power, and it is amplified by the social media. And you can easily imagine that potential financial damage for companies. Of course, companies at that time, Nestle, which was directly involved, was quite high. But even for companies also active in this market segment, but which were not directly involved, also for these companies, it had an impact at that point of time. Here in this slide, I raised the question, are we waiting for next packaging scandal now? Because if it's a small collection of recent headlines, but I would like to give you an answer from my perspective, not only asking the question, and my answer clearly is no. Why? Because as a consequence of scandals in the past, in the meantime, and I gave you some examples for that, legislation in India has become stricter, and we as Siegwerk, we are quite confident that it will not happen, because we really take our responsibility and walking the talk in providing the safest inks globally. So then let me come to the second part of my presentation, which is about mineral oils. First of all, also in this part, I would like to start with a short excursus into compliance. I call the slide Temple of Compliance, and compliance is what I would like to demonstrate is that compliance is not only legal compliance. I think it is clear what legal compliance is, but there are two more columns in this Temple of Compliance, which are brand owner requirements and self-commitments. So there are many brand owners, especially the big international accounts, having their own rules, which need to be fulfilled. And they have own rules also in terms of packaging and printing inks. And self-commitments, we as Siegwerk are also committed to a couple of things in order to make our inks safer. And what do I mean with the self-commitments? I will give you one example. One example is the OIPR exclusion policy. The OIPR is the European Printing Ink Association, and the European Printing Ink Association has an exclusion policy. And what does it mean? It means that it is a hazard-based policy, that certain substances are forbidden to use for ink production, and not only for inks which are finally used in food contact material applications, no, for all inks. And what kind of substances are in scope? So it is mainly related to so-called CMR substances, carcinogenic, mutagenic, reprotoxic substances, and certain toxic substances. For these kind of substances, there's a substitution principle by default available. And if substitution is not possible on short term, there is an exemption procedure for a certain period of time available, but it is quite difficult. So it needs, in this case, it needs to be demonstrated by the company that no risk is available for the consumer, and that in addition to that, substitution on short term is really not possible. It is a European self-commitment because it is a self-commitment of the European Printing Ink Association, where Siegwerk is member, but we as Siegwerk go beyond this self-commitment as association member because we apply these principles globally. So that means also all our inks on the Indian market are in line with the criteria of the oilfree exclusion policy. And I have to say, we are really proud about that. Food safety scandals. I already mentioned when I explained migration via the Gasfast principle, one scandal which was related to mineral oils. It happened in 2010. So cereal boxes were affected. And this was actually a food safety scandal which was related to mineral oils. There is a second example available from 2015. At that point of time, the NGO Foodwatch investigated different products in the market, and nearly half of the products they analyzed from their perspective too high amounts of mineral oils, and as a consequence of that, some retailers pulled affected products completely from their shelves, and this also triggered further investigations in other countries. And other countries, so that means also in France. And finally, I have to say, mineral oils became really under scrutiny in Europe. They are in the meantime even under the radar of authorities. So the current status is written on the right side of the slide. So where the first question is, where are mineral oil found? Mineral oils can be found in packaging made from recycled fibers, and they can migrate into food. And very often recycled fibers are used for secondary packaging. And I already explained the mechanism of the Gasfast transfer. And this is actually the principle how food is contaminated with mineral oils. Where are these mineral oils coming from? So the source of mineral oils in recycled fibers are mostly conventional offset inks, which are used, for example, in print media. And this problem is known since 2010. And the problem is not that easy to solve. So, for example, if there are regulatory restrictions implemented in Europe. I'm talking now about Europe, and that does not really help because there are also many fibers in European recycling plants coming from outside Europe. So a ban of mineral oils in this specific case does not help because there are also other sources from outside Europe available, which are subject to recycling. I mentioned that mineral oils are also under the radar of authorities. So there is a German ordinance on mineral oils in food packaging pending. I will come to that a little bit more in detail in some minutes. I also mentioned this in my previous slide, the study of the NGO Foodwatch, but also the European Commission is aware of that problem. And in 2017, they asked the member states to monitor the mineral oil intake. Yes, what are mineral oils? So it is at least mineral oils are a huge group of substances which are under toxicological discussion, even due to potential CMR properties. And there is a sub-classification for mineral oils available. MOSH are mineral oil saturated hydrocarbons, and MOA are mineral oil aromatic hydrocarbons. And generally, these two groups are differentiated, and their toxicological profile is also different. So let me start with MOSH, mineral oil saturated hydrocarbons. In general, these are linear alkanes, branched alkanes, alkyl substituted cycloalkanes. And according to the European Food Safety Agency, EFSA, the scope is a carbon chain length from C10 to C50. There are many different definitions available, and the difference is mainly related to the carbon chain length which is in scope. But the EFSA definition, I have to say, is the most comprehensive definition, covering mineral oils, as you see here, from C10 to C50. Mineral oil aromatic hydrocarbons are mainly alkyl substituted polyaromatic hydrocarbons, and also for MOA, according to the EFSA, the scope in terms of carbon chain length is 10 to 50. Let me come to the toxicological properties. I already mentioned that there are differences. So for MOSH, no adverse effects have been observed for carbon chain length C10 to C13. From C16 to C35, reports are available which showed accumulation in the organism, specifically in adipose tissue, lymph nodes, liver, and spleen. And also lipogranulomas in lymph nodes, liver, spleen were reported, but they are of low toxicological relevance. The picture is different for more, especially the polyaromatic hydrocarbons with more than 3 rings and no or little alkylation are genotoxic carcinogens, and some highly alkylated polyaromatic hydrocarbons can act as tumor promoters, and accumulation in the human body is possible. So if you just have a look at these toxicological profiles, the conclusion is that the health effects for MOA are more severe compared to MOSH. In this slide, again, you can see how mineral oils can enter food. So we have conventional offset inks, which are used for print media. Print media are recycled, and finally you have corrugated board, which can be used as secondary packaging material, or even as primary packaging material in case of this pizza box, for example. And as a consequence of that, finally, detection of mineral oils in food is possible. Maybe some of you already have this question in mind, whether in terms of recycling, de-inking is a solution for these kind of problems. And I'm not necessarily talking only about paper and board. I'm also talking about flexible packaging. So also plastic recycling is becoming more and more prominent in the course of circular economy considerations. And the question is de-inking the solution of all problems? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. Why? So I already mentioned right at the beginning of my presentation that substances below 1000 Dalton are generally able to migrate. And it, of course, depends on the substrate. For example, PET is a better barrier as PE or PP. But finally, also migration through PET is available and happens. You need, of course, to consider that if a substance migrates, it is, of course, not completely at the end of the day in the food. There are also a certain amount of migrants which are staying in the packaging material. And as soon as you recycle this packaging material, these migrants are available in the recycling stream. And the more recycling cycles you have, you can imagine that you have accumulation of migrants in the course of the different recycling cycles. And especially PE and PP, it is mentioned right at the bottom of the slide, could be a sink for migrants. And so deinking is good and is to a certain extent helpful. It reduces the problem, but it not completely solves the problem. And for that reason, another option to solve this problem are barrier coatings. And in this slide, you can see how that works. You have ink on the cardboard, and on top of this ink you have a barrier coating, which is now there. And this barrier coating protects, for example, the food from migrants via the gas phase coming from secondary packaging. So we are back to the problem of mineral oil contamination of secondary packaging. And as soon as you have a barrier coating on the primary packaging, this protects the food and to these mineral oil contamination. Of course, you need to use virgin fiber as primary packaging, and of course, the ink is, in this example, the ink is below the barrier coating. This means migration of ink ingredients can take place, and migration of migrants coming from the ink need to be controlled. Another option would be to put this barrier inside the primary packaging, but if you do that, then you have direct food contact to the barrier coating, and this means that there are much stricter requirements in terms of ingredients of the barrier coating. So actually, our preference is to have the barrier coating not inside, but outside the primary packaging. Yes, I already mentioned that there are mineral oils are under the radar of authorities. So, and I also mentioned that the problem of mineral oils is visible throughout Europe since 2017, and that the European Commission asked the member states to track the mineral oil contamination of food analytically. There's even a detailed guidance available from the Joint Research Center. It was published in 2019, and the monitoring is still ongoing. That was a European level. Now I'm switching to Germany. There is an association called German Food Federation, and they developed a toolbox which is available in the web free of any charge. And this toolbox helps you how to reduce mineral oil contamination of food. And if you look what you can do in terms of printing inks in order to avoid mineral oil contamination, it is there are two measures. First, use low migration and mineral oil free inks, and secondly, produce according to good manufacturing practice in order to avoid any contamination with mineral oils during the production process. I also mentioned that in Germany, there is the intention to implement so-called mineral oil ordinance. At the moment, there is a draft available. The last editing status is from March this year, and this status had been notified to the World Trade Organization. The reason for that is to get clarity whether there are any trade barriers in the international market available. If you look into the draft, the scope is more, and this is in line with what I already told you. So if you take the toxicological properties, more are more severe compared to MOSH. And in scope of the draft, German mineral oil ordinance are more with the carbon chain lengths from C16 to C35. So it is not that comprehensive compared to the EFSA definition, and in scope are more originating from recycled paper. Functional barriers are mandatory, but there are several exemptions where more transfer is not assignable. For example, for frozen food. Again, I'm coming back to one of my slides right at the beginning. Temperature has an influence on migration behavior, and the higher the temperature, the better the migration. And that means the lower the temperature, migration is on a comparable low level. And also more transfer is not assignable in case of short contact of dry food. There are limits available from 0.5 milligrams per kilogram food, which is 500 ppb in food. And if you have a food simulant, it is 150 ppb. The difference is related to the fact that in the simulant, the mineral oils are easier to detect, and it is applicable for the total amount of mineral oils, not for single mineral oils. And as I said, MOSH are not in scope. Coming to the brand owners, there are a couple of brand owners not accepting mineral oils. If we take, for example, Perfetti van Melle, they explicitly banned mineral oils for food packaging inks. And yes, short conclusion. On European level, again, the European Printing Association excludes mineral oils for food packaging. Again, in a different range. Here, the range is carbon chain lengths from C20 to C30. Siegwerk excludes in Europe MOSH and more at even stricter range than the association. In our scope, the carbon chain length is C10 to C35. In France, there is a circular economy law in the pipeline coming quite soon into force, prohibiting the use of mineral oil in inks for packaging. And finally, I have to say risk elimination is the only foolproof solution, and mineral oil-free inks are readily available in the Indian market as well. So my last part is about migration optimized inks. Don't worry, that is quite a short part. I already mentioned that we are committed to the oil care exclusion policy, and based on individual company decisions, we decided to ban other substances which are not in scope of the exclusion policy. But at the end of the day, we are talking about single substances. The main ingredients of an ink are solvents, additives, binders, and colorants. And as I mentioned, single substances are banned due to the exclusion policy or additional individual company decision. If we are talking about migration optimized inks, what does that exactly mean? It means that each ingredient of a migration optimized inks has passed thoroughly selection of raw materials with low migration potential. And it is working according to the fishnet principle, which you can see in the slide. So a non-optimized system contains a couple of migrants which are able to migrate into the food, which is not good. And a migration optimized system contains only a limited number of migrants which end up in the food. And the solution, of course, it is fine to have certain substances not available in the ink, like toluene, like mineral oils and heavy metals, PCBs, phthalates, etc. But finally, what we need is a migration optimized system, which is a more comprehensive approach. In December last year, December 2020, at that time, our CEO in India, Ashish Pradhan, announced that our intention to get mineral oil free in India for our Siegwerk inks, except unavoidable traces below 0.1% for so-called nutrition, hygiene, and pharma application inks. But this is our intention, and we are taking, of course, this goal quite serious and working on that. And there are already ink series available on the Indian market, which are fulfilling the requirements and which are mineral oil free. So let me conclude. Migration optimized safe inks. What is it? These are inks where the raw materials, the ingredients have been thoroughly selected and evaluated. They are in compliance to the Indian standard 15495. They are in compliance to many brand owner specifications. systematic phase out for single substances, of course, are considered as well. But in addition to that, the solution beyond is a general reduction of migrants by setting quite strict specifications. And as I mentioned, we already developed mineral oil-free solutions for the Indian market, and they are already established in the Indian market. So just to give you some names of ink series, Tempo Vibrant, Tempo Fresh Plus, and Tempo Vision Plus are 3 examples for ink series, for mineral oil-free ink series on the Indian market. And finally, we also do transparent communication downstream the packaging chain with our statement of composition and with our technical data sheet, which are helpful tools for the stakeholders down the packaging chain. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to getting your questions, but first of all, I would like to hand over to my colleague Jatin. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Shreen, can you confirm if I'm audible to everyone? Sriram, can you confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, Jatin, you are audible. You're audible.
Okay, great. Just let me know once my screen is visible as well.
Yes, we can see a screen.
So first of all, thank you, Evert, for giving us the deep insights on why mineral oils are bad, about their toxicological profile, and also telling us about the situations from a European perspective. Now, to the audience, I'll be talking about the Indian perspective, the changing regulatory scope. To begin with, I think all the members in the packaging supply chain are very well aware of the new packaging safety norms, which were introduced on 3rd of January 2019 and have been enforced since 1st of July 2019. Now, the standard is pretty elaborate, but I will touch upon the things which are related to printing inks. The 4 important pointers are there in this standard on packaging safety from FSSAI. First thing, food business operators are responsible. So FSSAI, the Food Safety and Standard Authority of India, says that food business operators, the brand owners, are the legal custodians of the packaging material safety. So if something goes wrong tomorrow, the packaging, the brand owners will be responsible for anything going wrong for any non-compliance. However, I would like to stress upon this fact that as a responsible packaging supply chain, each and every packaging supply chain member has an equal responsibility, and that is what Siegwerk believes in, and that is what Siegwerk is committed to. So despite the legal obligations on brand owners, as Evert also mentioned, for us, the compliance is not only about the legal requirements, but it's also about the brand owner expectations, and it's also about the self-commitments that we make, so which are beyond the legal requirements. The next thing is the food grade definitions. So I believe a lot of you would be surprised to know that we have been using the terminology of food grade packaging material for decades. But before 2019, there was nothing called as food grade. So what were you getting? Probably whatever was created to be so-called food grade by buying companies or packaging companies were what you were getting that time. However, this thing was taken into notice by FSSAI, and now they have defined food grade to have a standardized approach on food grade packaging material. How have they defined it? This is really, really important piece. Food grade packaging material is a packaging material that does not endanger human health, so that should not harm any consumer. It should not bring about any change in the composition of product or organoleptic changes. And just to mention, this definition of food grade is exactly the same what is reflected in the framework regulation for Europe 1935-2004. The third important thing is printing inks for use on food packages shall conform to IS 15495. Now, whether you are creating a primary packaging material, secondary or tertiary, it doesn't make a difference. As per FSSAI, if you are creating a packaging material for food and you are using inks onto it, they have to comply to IS 15495. The fourth important point is that you cannot create any application where printing inks will be in direct contact with the foodstuff. So those applications where you have a direct contact between the printing inks and the foodstuff are now prohibited. So if you see something of that sort existing in the market, I can assure you that is non-compliant, and FSSAI can definitely take serious actions onto it. We have seen what they have done to a brand in 2015, and this would be no different for any other brand owner now. Going forward, as FSSAI raised the bar on packaging safety, BIS also took this responsibly, and they raised the bar on packaging safety with respect to packaging inks by revising the standard that was existing since 2004. So the packaging inks guideline was revised in 2020, and this has been now enforced from 1st July 2021. So from this year, July, this standard is enforced. What does we mean by enforcement? This means whatever is written in the standard is now applicable to all the brand owners, to all the packaging supply chains. Without any further extensions, without any delay, this has to be implemented. So it's already, the timeline has exceeded. Now, what has BIS done? So it's again an elaborative standard, and I'll not go into details, but I'll just share what has been updated. So in the revised version, for the first time, they have put the controls on the heavy metals for printing inks by stating a statement that sum of concentration levels of lead, cadmium, mercury, and chromium shall not exceed 100 ppm of printing inks. They have made material safety data sheets for ink formulations mandatory. So before 2020, or before I would say July 2021, if you were not sharing MSDS, it was fine. But now if you're not sharing MSDS, then you are non-complying to the legal obligations specified by FSSAI through the BIS standard. There are few chemicals which have been added into the list. Toluene tops the list because it was used in a lot of flexible formulations. So toluene by now should have been phased out from all the formulations. If somebody is adding toluene into the ink formulations, or if any brand owner is using inks made out of toluene, they are not complying to the legal obligations specified by FSSAI. The other three materials are two phthalates, DBP and DNP, and titanium acetylonate. So these three chemicals along with toluene have been banned. So you cannot use these chemicals in the ink formulations going forward. That's not possible. Now, I would like to leave you all with a thought that you should seriously think about. Now, standards are going to evolve from here, and the bar on the packaging safety is going to rise further. However, the question is mineral oil usage in India legally complied or not? Now, a lot of my friends in the packaging supply chain would argue that the standard on packaging inks right now do not mention about mineral oil. So if we are using mineral oil inks, we are complying because the legal standard, the Annexure A, the Annexure 1 of the standard, the ink standard, does not have mineral oils as on the list. However, FSSAI, which is the apex body for the food safety control in India, has also defined the term food grade. Now, we need to understand, as Evert has mentioned, that the component of mineral oils, that's MOA, they are genotoxic carcinogens, which means they can cause cancer. This means that they can endanger human health. They can endanger human health. Now, by this means, it nowhere complies to the definition of food grade specified by FSSAI. Now, the problem is we can discuss, a lot of people can debate and discuss on the list and off the list, but the reality or the fact remains that mineral oils are hazardous. They can lead to cancer, and they do not comply to the definition of food grade specified by FSSAI. So tomorrow, if anything goes wrong, and why I'm saying so, because today also the Indian market is heavily dependent upon mineral oil based inks in the offset segment. So probably 90% of the conventional inks you have in the market, or more than that, are based on mineral oils. And when these mineral oils are applied onto your secondary packaging, and when you take these to your homes and these mineral oils migrate, they can lead to cancer. And this is nowhere close to the definition of food grade. So tomorrow, if something goes wrong in the market, something is talked about any brand owner or converter, I think it will be really, really difficult, not only for the brand owner, but for the entire packaging supply chain to demonstrate the compliance to the term food grade. And this is the reason Evert also mentioned that Siegwerk believes in self-commitment. We believe in unconditional commitment to product safety. We believe that we have to go beyond the legal obligations. And this is the reason that we are promoting mineral oil-free inks only as a first step. There is more to it, but this is the first step that is the need of this hour. And why I'm saying so, if we continue to do so, okay, if we continue to do so, 10 years down the line, and I'm going to say it bluntly, I'm sorry for that, but I'm going to say it bluntly here. Down the line 10 years, if you have more cancer patients in India than what you are having year-on-year basis now, then it could be possibly because of mineral oils as well. The problem with the chemical contaminants is that you cannot relate it. You cannot relate whether this cancer is coming from mineral oil or from some other chemical. You cannot relate it, whether it's coming from packaging or is it directly from the raw materials. That relation to be established is difficult, but when we know that this chemical is carcinogen, I think it's our moral responsibility to take this off the list. So when I say it's a moral responsibility, I'm saying it's a moral responsibility of all ink manufacturers, not only Siegwerk, to take this chemical out of their ink formulations as soon as possible. The brand owners who are custodians, they need to specify this very strongly into their specifications to avoid the use of mineral oil based inks. Because 10 years down the line, on the list is not going to work for the people who will be suffering from cancer. Okay, so it's not going to work for them, whether it's on the list or off the list. We know it's bad, we need to remove it. Europe has done this, China has done this, a lot of other countries have done this. And I believe every Indian individual life is as important as a life of an European. And for that matter, I strongly urge the brand owners to specify mineral oil free inks at the earliest, and all the ink manufacturers to make all the possible attempts to move out of mineral oil inks. With this, now I can take to the next section. Siegwerk, a reliable expert as a partner. So what Siegwerk is doing in this space? We believe that there's 3 steps to safe and compliant packaging. We believe that systematic processes are the key to food safety. You have to build in those processes that will ensure food safety consistently. And for this reason, Siegwerk has built those processes. We have a process called raw material approval process. Every raw material that we use to create Siegwerk inks is cleaned as per a defined specification, and then only that raw material is allowed to be used for the food packaging. If there is any raw material which does not comply with the specifications, those chemicals are not allowed to be used in the food packaging. For an easy implementation, we have a tool called formulation guideline. There are formulators, or what you can call the R&D guys of the ink company, can formulate the writings with this information being available to them in a very easy format. And this is supplemented by good manufacturing practices and analytical spot check testings, which further gives a confidence of safe inks. As I said, and I'm reiterating the fact, Siegwerk believes in going beyond the legal requirements. So there are many chemicals which Evert also explained, the UP exclusion policy, which says not to use any chemical that can cause cancer, that can alter the genes, or that is reprotoxic. Now, this is a UP exclusion policy. This is a policy that is expected to be followed only in Europe, but Siegwerk is following this for all the products in India. This is what our commitment towards product safety is. This is going beyond the legal requirements. We operate from a toluene-free manufacturing facility, and all the systematic processes that we have built are transparent and auditable. So we invite all our brand owners as well as our customers to visit us to see what we are doing and to see how we are doing. Product safety guidance is the second step to safe and compliant packaging. So we believe in partnering with our customers and brand owners. We help them how to use things. We provide them with all the technical information. We also provide them with all the compliance related documentation, the information on migrants so that they can do their assessment of their final packaging material. And we also support the supply chain in terms of transition to compliance. So Siegwerk work as a partner with you to make sure that you move to compliant inks in the right format, in the right manner. The third thing is proactive work for product safety. Globally as well as locally, Siegwerk is well associated with associations as well as authorities. We keep a close watch on what is changing in terms of regulation, what is expected to change, and if there is anything that can be done to raise the bar on packaging safety, Siegwerk will be the first company to do that. We have always been in the forefront on the compliances, and I can give an example to this. Toluene in the packaging inks is banned in 2020. Siegwerk stopped the use of toluene in packaging inks since 2017, much before the legal requirements. So this is the reason why we say that we have always been in the forefront when it comes to compliances. We have a validated documentation cell, which creates these declarations in an authentic base through our systematic processes. And we always love to collaborate with brand owners, converters, whosoever who wants to have more knowledge on this subject. We offer them workshops, Q&A guides, brochures, consulting, and also some online information. Apart from this, with our commitment, we have gone one step ahead. Siegwerk today is the only ink company that has a dedicated information center with respect to the compliances. We have created something called as Ink Safety Portal, which you can have an access to through the Siegwerk website through a very simple registration process. Once you register yourself, you will find yourself with a lot of information on the subject of packaging safety, packaging ink safety, different regulations across the globe, and much more that is concerned with this subject. With this, I would like to close this session and thank you from myself as well as Evert, and we would now be open to the Q&A. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jatin, and thank you, Evert, for this deep dive on the topic. I think the attendees have a lot of questions. One thing that your presentations made more than clear is food packaging needs to be safe for use with food. Chemicals can potentially contaminate food when in direct contact. So my first question before I take the question from the attendees is that how do we ensure the FSSAI regulations which ensure that food packaging meets stringent safety standards is made popular?
Okay, so Evert, I can take this probably since it's in the Indian context. So I think it's a big gap that is right now existing in the Indian packaging supply chain. We have to understand that the rules are created by FSSAI, and the packaging material is created by the printers who takes the raw material stuff from substrate manufacturer, ink manufacturer, adhesive suppliers. Now, these two are two different industries. One is the food industry and one is the chemical industry. Now, the problem here is that the food industry, the Foods Authority have released the norms to the food industries, but they have not made the attempts to create the awareness among the chemical sector who is not really very sure what to do. So how we can make this popular? Siegwerk in this year has done 8 webinars on this subject, and we will continue to do that. Even the All India Printing Ink Manufacturing Association, where we are also a part, they have made several attempts to do that. But I think more than that, brand owners regulators and more associations, probably the Printers Association as well as the Food Processor Association, they also need to step up. They need to understand about the existing gap, and then they need to create more awareness on this. So my clear, precise answer would be that the associations, the regulators, and the brand owners needs to step up to create more awareness on the subject. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Jatin. So I'm going to take questions from the audience now. So there is a question from Vikas Raghuvanshi. He wants to know, is there any possibility of migration of printing ink through secondary and tertiary packaging material into food?
Yes, I
Evert?
take this question.
Yes, Evert, you want to take that?
Yes, I will take that. Yes, the answer is clearly yes. It is possible, and that's the reason why we as Siegwerk do not differentiate anymore between primary, secondary, tertiary packaging. We just talking about food packaging and inks which are suitable for food packaging. So we do not reduce our standards and our requirements for secondary or tertiary packaging applications. We're just talking about food packaging due to the fact that migration is possible from tertiary packaging to food as well.
Okay, got it.
And just to add,
yeah. Go on.
Regulators, as I shared in FSSAI snapshot, they also say printing inks for food packages needs to comply to IS 15495, irrespective primary, secondary, or tertiary. So again, the Indian government is also clear that there is a threat, even if it's secondary or tertiary packaging. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Jatin. So there's another question from Zainul Lakdawala. They want to know what should be the ideal ink film thickness in terms of grams or meter.
Okay. Evert, can I take this, or would you like to take this?
You can start answering, okay, and
sure.
Maybe I can add then.
So I think it's yes, application weight is one of the factor, but I think it's also depend upon the printing application. So what you need to print and how you need to print. But I think more than the application weight, what matters is how you formulate those inks. If you have not formulated the inks with the right chemical, if you have not done the risk assessments in the right manner, probably application weight would become secondary. So application weight is definitely important. So there is a direct correlation, more the application weight, more the migrant. But I think it will be always driven by the application itself. And I think our focus should be on the formulations and how we do the assessments of buyings. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, only one additional comment from my side. Yes, it is true, and I demonstrated it in my presentation that the higher the application weight, the higher the risk of migration. But I did not mention that the higher the application weight, of course, the higher the costs for the converter, because they need to use more ink. So that's also a matter of fact.
Okay. Got it. There is the next question is from Kanwar Nanda. In fact, they have two questions. The first one is in a triple layered packaging structure consisting of polylayer and aluminum, could it be termed as a barrier for migration, especially to oils, etc.? And is there any minimum limit in micrometers required to control or contain?
Yes, so if I mentioned it in my presentation that aluminum can be regarded as total barrier if the thickness is higher than 6 micrometers. So okay, above 6 micrometers, aluminum layer is regarded as a total barrier.
Okay. They also ask, is there any references, standards, or guidelines for the same? Are there any specific standards or guidelines for this, Evert?
What do you mean? For what?
To determine the minimum limit in specific to this question in terms of a triple layer packaging. So what kind of guidelines do they have to follow to ensure that migration does not happen?
At least what I can recommend is also from OIPIA. There's a guideline on migration testing, and the different options for structures are so diverse that in case of critical applications, our recommendation is to perform migration tests, and the protocols which need to be used are laid down in the OIPIA migration guidance, which is publicly available.
Okay, got it. I think you covered this specifically, Jatin, but they also want to know, do the Indian regulations govern the mineral oil part? Maybe FSSAI or BIS, do they cover the mineral oil aspect?
Yes, for me, like for a consumer, for a regulator, and for a brand owner, I would say yes. When they say your packaging material needs to be food grade, and food grade means that your packaging material should not endanger human health, they regulate it in that way. Yes.
So there is no specific mention of mineral oil, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right now, there's no specific mention. Yes.
Okay.
This is in discussion, but I don't know when it will come out. So as of now, if I talk on the date, there's no mention of mineral oil specifically in IS 15495. But irrespective of that, you as a brand owner, you are always driven by FSSAI definition of food grade for a packaging material. And then tomorrow, if somebody asks you, you are using mineral oils, they are genotoxic carcinogens. And in Deinks, the range could be 35 to 40% of mineral oils. So you're using in a really, really good concentration. So how you are claiming your inks to be, or how you are claiming your packaging material to be food grade, then I think it will be a challenge for that brand owner to explain how they will call it food grade. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So the next question is from Amit Sharma. So the question is, migration of benzophenone through printed material into the packaged product is an area of concern, but then why the same benzophenone isn't an area of concern when it is used in perfume and lip balms and other sunscreen creams in certain concentration? So they want to know, why is there a differential approach to benzophenone?
Okay, so would you like to answer, Evert, or should I take it?
Yes, my answer is that of course the regulators are different, and in some regulations go ahead and the others follow. So it is not everything done completely in parallel. But you also have to consider that in terms of food safety, you have oral exposure because the food is contaminated, you eat it. And in case of cosmetics, you have dermal exposure and you have the skin, so which can act as additional barrier. So from my point of view as a toxicologist, it is not that severe as if you directly ingest benzophenone via the food.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to add, what Evert mentioned in the very beginning, that the regulations are not harmonized. So benzophenone is definitely a concern. Yes, with the exposure, the measure would differ, but definitely benzophenone is a concern. And why it is not being specifically highlighted is because regulations are not very standardized. So maybe some countries have stronger regulations. They have more strong control over it, and we with the weak regulations are still struggling our way to ensure consumer safety. Yeah.
I have one additional comment on that.
Yes, Evert.
Independently of safety aspects, benzophenone has also an organoleptic effect. So it has an effect on the odor and the taste of the food, which of course needs to be avoided in terms of perfume. Maybe the odor of benzophenone is not that strict that it has an impact on the odor of the perfume, which is anyway available.
Okay, all right. There is a question from Partha Pratim Sanyal. They want to know that as per industry experts, the usage of mineral oil has many environmental hazard, and a feasible substitute is vegetable-based oil. But some printing professionals substitute vegetable-based oil as rheological problem of printability. So what is your opinion on this ongoing debate?
Okay, maybe it's in the Indian context, so I can take this up.
Sure, sure.
Evert was also mentioned, we are already releasing mineral oil-free inks, and I can tell you that these inks are running exceptionally well in the market, at par with the conventional offset inks now. So we do not see this to be a challenge. So as I said, yes, the ink manufacturer has to be your partner to make sure that your transitions are smooth. And I can assure you, at least Siegwerk is one of the partner that you can rely upon to make these transitions towards compliant systems. Yes.
Okay. So there is an anonymous question. What standards are available for printing media to qualify for MOSH or MOAH? Also, would they want to know what standards are available for migration tests? Or Evert?
So maybe Jatin, you can take the first part. Second part is the same answer which I already gave. There are guideline available, migration guideline on the OIPIA website, which where different protocols for different applications are explained and how migration can be tested. That would be my answer for the second part of the question. And Jatin, now it's your part for the first part.
To the best of our knowledge, in India, there are no such regulation for print media, which regulates mineral oils as of now. So there are no such standards right now for print media in that context. Yeah.
Okay. There's a question from Rahul Kumar. So he wants to know what kind of conversations are ink industry firms like Siegwerk having with the duplex board manufacturers. Should the duplex board manufacturers be controlling the COP value to handle the toxicology profile?
Okay, I think the best answer to this is that, to be very frank, we are not very well in connect with the duplex board manufacturers. But I think, as I said, the legal responsibilities are on the brand owners. However, every partner in the packaging supply chain is equally responsible. And I think it has to be an integrated approach where everyone has to come together to make it possible. And this is something that we see as a gap. This is the reason why I say that brand owners now need to step up to have a more integrated approach, because if you are having the right set of things, but if you're using the bad boards, it's not going to serve the purpose. So it's really important that we now follow an integrated approach, because it's a need of the hour. It's a need of the hour. We have to change how we have been doing business, how we have been talking about packaging safety in past. That's a talk of past times. Now we have to change with the changing regulations. Yeah.
Okay. One final question. We have already run out of time to Evert. So what will happen to packaging products in the post-COVID era? Can you tell us 3 trends that you have spotted and that all the converters and the industry needs to be aware of?
That's a really a difficult question. From my point of view, future trends are not linked to the pandemic. So the pandemic does not really have an influence on safe packaging. The only thing which we observe is that due to hygiene measures which have been taken in the course of the pandemic, the importance of packaging in this regard, in order to protect food and from any kind of contamination, makes it even more important that food packaging is required, that we cannot substitute food packaging by something else in the future. Yeah, it is really important, and all the other mega trends like circular economy, recycling of packaging material for food, that is independent of the pandemic. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you again so much, Evert and Jatin. I must say, lots of clarity for a non-technical person like me. Two things stood out for me. Authorities are consistently involved in upgrading their standards and benchmarking them based on stringent global standards. And as authorities are getting more vigilant than ever, which puts pressure on the supply chain partners to align and deliver safe products. Brand owners and packaging developers are constantly designing new packaging structures and utilizing innovative materials. But at the same time, they have high sustainability standards for their packaging. Printing ink must therefore be formulated to ensure that migration risk is minimized at constant ink performance. Evert especially emphasized the need for safe packaging inks to safeguard that there is no migration concern onto the final packaging, and we must not wait for the next packaging scandal. I think I would summarize from a non-technical point of view, that is the most standout point for us. We'll see you again in our next webinar. Thank you, Siegwerk, our wonderful panelists, and thanks to all our delegates. Have a good evening and stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Everyone, bye-bye.